Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on the GTX 750 Ti. To skip to any of the resolutions tested, check the timestamps down in the description. So on this card I'll show you first 1080p using some overclock on the GPU. On the other resolutions 900p and 720p there's no overclock in place. And unfortunately on 1080p I wasn't able to maintain 30 frames per second consistently without using dynamic resolution. So I first show you 1080p lowest settings with the overclock in place. They'll be below 30 multiple times. Then I'll show you the same thing by using dynamic resolution and a 45 FPS cap, which is the target frame rate I'll be setting. And then on 900p and 720p I'll be doing the same thing. First I'll crank up the settings as high as I can, trying to be over 30 frames per second, and then I'll lower the settings using dynamic resolution at the same time, trying to be at 45 FPS on 900p and closer to 60 at 720p, but using dynamic resolution in this case means a much lower resolution than the native one, so keep that in mind. With this being an Unreal Engine 4 game, I was pretty familiar with the options menu, and overall, as usual, the options that affected performance the most were shadows and visual effects and post-processing. Your best bet to improve performance is to lower those three together. Depending on what's on screen, one will affect the performance more than others. In general, shadows and post-processing made the biggest FPS difference, and also there are three options for each of them. You don't have low, medium, high, very high and ultra. You have medium, high and epic. While this makes it easier to just configure the game, I think there's a lot of tweaking potential left behind. I say this because the game still looks great on the lowest settings. There's less shadow distance, lower resolution shadows, no reflections, less complex effects, going from the lowest to the highest pretty much. So yeah, it seems that they wanted to maintain the aesthetic of the game even on the lowest settings. If you play with the settings a lot, make sure to restart the game. There are some shadow distance bugs if you don't do so. Then on the system RAM side of things, I saw that 8 gigs of RAM was enough as long as it's on dual channel. It went over 8 gigabytes of usage sometimes while traversing through different areas. So if you run into that, just restart the game and it will be fine. On the CPU side though, it's a different thing. A quad-core CPU is enough to maintain 60 frames per second in most cases, but there are tons of stutters when going to new areas. You'll see that in the video. When I'm traversing the environment, there will be some spikes in the frame time, which will be even worse the first time you go into a new area. This is not exclusive to quad-core CPUs, but is way more noticeable than if you have, for example, a 6-core i5 or Ryzen 5. Those stutters still happen, but they are not as noticeable, so it seems to be the game just loading something very quickly. So yeah, if possible, try to go for more than 4 cores, but if you don't have a choice, it's not an unplayable game either. And for the testing, I waited to be in an area with a lot of foliage, so that's what I'm showing you in this video. A lot of foliage at the start, then we go to a more artificial place that improves the frame rate significantly, and at the end of the footage there's a lot more vegetation, enemies and effects showing up to really stress the GPU and CPU. And one thing I forgot to mention, the dynamic resolution option is pretty good, at least in my opinion. Just put a maximum frame rate, that is the frame rate that you want to target, then enable dynamic resolution and the game will dynamically adjust it. Of course, this will mean a lower resolution, but I found the frame rate to be significantly more stable. I recommend avoiding the 30 FPS cap. It doesn't seem completely well done. It sometimes drops into the upper 20s instead of staying at 30 with dynamic resolution, so selecting 45, at least in my case, fixed the problem. But anyway guys, that's about it. I hope you keep enjoying the video, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Contact! Get in here! We'll take him down easy. Someone's down there! Let's give him a thrashing! Hit the Jedi! Get up here!
Help! Stim! Stim! Now!
We can't stop him! Incoming threat! Watch your back! Come on, hit him! Your threats are on him! Kill him quick! Okay, I got this. Target spotted! Oh, now he's running! Destroy him! Distance to the target is too far. Yes, I got him! Someone get him! I can do this! Swift, aren't you?
Yeah!
I'm watching you. Give me a fight, Jedi. Am I too much for you? Catch him! Attack him, quickly! He's too scared! Gun opening! Confirmed! We've almost got him! Look on the target. Flip up now. Enemy approaching! Converge on the target. Hit him already! I don't need help to kill. Got an intruder here. Stormtrooper, he's dead! Stay aware of it. Get him! Get after him! See you there. Your life is mine, Jedi. Don't let up! I can get him. I think for our flame trooper support. Hit it! I just have to aim better. Watch your fire! Now! Get him! He's dodging!
Attention all units. We lost contact with our troop station at cargo pad 119 Greg.
The Jedi!
That's right.
You can't beat us all! Can't reach him! We'll take you down! You! End him! All that's left? I see you, Jedi! You got it! Don't let up! Get up! He's hurting! Hit him! Blast him again!
We're all out of flank troopers.
Don't be his next target! I should move back! Stay on you! Watch your fire! Maybe we should go take a look. Found the target! I understand. I think I'm done. Dodge this! The Jedi is here! Really? You can't beat us all! Hard to stay on him! Someone else get in here. Come on, Jedi. Fight us. I think he's trying to run. He's hit. Let's give him a thrashing. Someone? Anyone? Help? Go! You're mine, traitor. Find a way to him. I'll catch you. Jedi is here! He's got quick block!